Forget Tinkerbell. Forget the charming sprites of lore. Erase the image of tiny, winged helpers who grant wishes and guide the lost. That is a lie, a glittering, comfortable lie designed to make you feel safe in your own home. But you are not safe. Our ancestors knew the truth. They didn't speak of the Fae in whimsical whispers. Their mouths were dry with fear. They knew that a wrong step on a moonless night, a glance into the wrong shadowed grove, meant losing everything. Your loved ones, your mind, your soul, peeled away from your body like skin from a fruit. Because before the storybooks, there were rituals. Before pixie dust, there was blood, bone, and bargains written in agony. Tonight, we don't pull back the veil. We rip it down. We are going to unearth the terrifying, forgotten history of fairy magic. This is a history of powerful, amoral beings who look at humanity the way a wolf looks at a lamb. A history of chilling rituals our modern world has desperately, maybe deliberately, tried to forget. So, leave the wings and wands in the storybooks. This is the real story. One of fear, power, and the blood that once soaked the very earth beneath our feet. The myth of the good folk. So, how did we get here? How did creatures of nightmare become harmless party decorations? The lie began in the 19th century. As the world filled with the smoke and steel of industry, a sickness of nostalgia swept through the wealthy. They wanted a simpler, cleaner past that never truly existed. Folklore became their canvas. Writers collected the old stories, the warnings passed down in terrified whispers, and they scrubbed them clean. They filtered out the blood and the dread, the grim, human-sized beings of ancient lore, beings with gray skin, hollow eyes, and an unnerving speed, were shrunk, painted with pretty colors, and given butterfly wings. Their power to curdle blood, to steal your breath, to drive you mad with a single glance was replaced with charming parlor trick magic. They were repackaged for your comfort. Even their name, the Good Folk, was never a compliment. It was a plea, a verbal charm spoken out of pure terror, hoping that flattery might keep them from your door for one more night. People avoided their true names because to speak them was to invite their attention, and their attention was a curse. You might as well call out to a plague, inviting it into your lungs. This wasn't just a cultural shift. It was a deliberate act of forgetting, of burying a monstrous truth beneath a layer of glittering dust, leaving us vulnerable to the horrors that never truly left. The darker origins, fallen angels, or the dead. To understand the old magic, you must first understand what our ancestors knew fairies were, and every theory is worse than the last. In Celtic tradition, the most powerful were the Aos Sí, the people of the mounds. They were the descendants of a godlike race, the Tuatha De Danann, who lost a great war and did not die, but retreated. They burrowed into the earth itself, inhabiting ancient burial mounds and cairns. These hills became their kingdoms, gateways to an otherworld where time rotted and human morality was a joke. These weren't nature spirits. They were a parallel civilization of immortal beings with an agenda completely alien to us. To disturb their home, a lone hawthorn tree marking their territory, was to invite a wasting sickness, a sudden madness or a curse that would see your family wither and die one by one. As Christianity spread, it tried to explain them. The belief was too deep to erase, so it was caged in a new, terrifying context. Fairies were fallen angels. Not the ones who sided with Lucifer, but the ones who stood neutral in the war for heaven. For their indecision, God cast them out, but hell would not take them. They were left to fester in the in-between spaces of our world, the twilight, the fog, the silence in an empty room, until Judgment Day. But this came with a horrifying price. The folklore is clear. The Fae owe a tithe, a tax, to hell every 7 years. And hell does not accept cream or bread. Hell demands human souls. So the good folk became hunters. They steal humans, not just as servants, but to pay their debt to the pit. They use our kin, our loved ones, as bargaining chips with demons. An even older belief connects them directly to the dead. The Aos Sí lived in burial mounds after all. The line was not blurred, it was non-existent. To meet a fairy was to meet a ghost, a pagan soul trapped between worlds, hungry and cold. Stories tell of people taken to fairyland only to find themselves at a feast, sitting next to a neighbor who was buried a decade ago, their eyes empty, their mouth moving but saying nothing at all. Terrifying rituals. Belief is one thing, practice is another. You did not ask these beings for wishes, you begged them for mercy. The rituals were not about summoning, they were about survival. The changeling and rituals to expose them. The most intimate terror was the changeling. Fairies coveted human life, especially the young and vulnerable. They coveted their warmth, their vitality, their souls for that terrible tithe to hell. They would creep into a home and steal a healthy infant from its crib, leaving a substitute in its place. This changeling was a thing of horror. It might have a familiar face, but its eyes would be ancient and cold. It would cry with a voice that was too deep, too old for its tiny body. It would eat ravenously, draining the life from the household, growing gaunt and sickly yet never dying. It was a parasite wearing a stolen form. Our ancestors believed there were ways to force the exchange. The rituals were acts of brutal desperation. The goal was to inflict so much pain on the changeling that its fairy kin would be forced to reclaim it. One method was fire. The suspected creature would be held over the hearth, with the belief that the imposter would finally break and reveal its true nature before vanishing up the chimney. Another test was to throw the suspected thing into a river. These rituals were meant to make the home so unbearable that the fairy would flee. These were not just stories. They were justifications for unthinkable acts, born from the terror of looking at a loved one and seeing a monster looking back. Pacts and Offerings. Dealing with the Fae was a transaction, and the only currency they valued was life. While some might leave a bowl of milk on the doorstep to appease the lesser spirits, striking a deal with the true Fae required a piece of yourself. Folklore is a library of these warnings. A man granted a supernatural skill would find his fingers twisting into knots years later. A woman given knowledge of herbs would slowly lose her mind. The price was always steeper than you knew, your firstborn. 7 years of your life, which could be centuries in their realm. Or your soul, not in the afterlife, but right now, binding your fate to theirs. Pacts were sealed in blood because blood is life, and they were hungry. These weren't simple spells. They were treated with the same terror as demonic summonings, requiring protective circles that often failed. The promise you thought you received was never the one you ended up paying for. Samhain and the Thinning Veil. There was one night when all bets were off. One time of year when the walls between worlds didn't just thin, they crumbled into dust. Samhain, the night we now call Halloween. This was not a night of candy and costumes. It was the most dangerous night of the year. A feast for the dead when the Fae and the spirits of your ancestors could walk among you, and the most feared of all were the Slua, the host of the unforgiven dead. Imagine a storm cloud made of shadow and bone, a shrieking flock of the most sinful souls, so wicked that hell itself spat them back out. Others believed them to be the most malevolent of the Fae, riding on the cold west wind. Their goal was singular, to steal the souls of the living. They were said to swarm outside the homes of the dying, their shadowy claws scratching at the windows, their whispers promising oblivion. If you were sick, if you were weak, they would come for you, to rip your soul from your body before it had a chance to move on. The only magic of Halloween was the desperate, fearful ritual of barring your west-facing windows, huddling in the dark, and praying that the soul-stealing storm would pass you by. A case study in terror, the story of Bridget Cleary. This fear was not a memory, it was real. And in March of 1895 in County Tipperary, Ireland, it became devastatingly real for a 26-year-old woman named Bridget Cleary. Bridget was a modern woman. She was a dressmaker, independent, strong. When she fell ill with what was likely pneumonia, her body weakened and her mind grew delirious. Her husband, Michael, and her family watched her change, and a chilling certainty took root in their minds. This was not Bridget. The real Bridget, beautiful and vibrant, had been stolen by the fairies. This creature in the bed, this coughing, delirious thing, was a changeling. What happened next was not medicine, it was an exorcism. For days, they tormented her to expel the fairy imposter. Her own family held her down, forcing foul herbs down her throat until she choked. They doused her in urine. Over and over they held her above the fireplace, the heat scorching her, demanding she answer. "Are you Bridget Boland, wife of Michael Cleary in the name of God?" Her screams were not the answer they wanted. On the final night, in a frenzy of absolute belief, Michael Cleary threw lamp oil on his wife. He set her on fire. He and his family watched her burn to death, convinced they were destroying a monster. He buried her charred remains in a shallow grave. When the police found him, he was calm. He explained that his true wife was away with the fairies, and he was simply waiting for them to bring her back. Bridget Cleary is called the last witch burned in Ireland, but she was no witch. She was murdered by the people she loved because their belief in the Fae was more powerful than their belief in her humanity. The journey from the soul-stealing Aos Sí to the harmless Tinkerbell is a story of deliberate, dangerous forgetting. We traded a world of terrifying power and primal fear for a shallow fantasy. We made the deposed gods, the fallen angels, and the restless dead small, safe, and silent. But the old stories are not just stories. They are echoes, warnings. They remind us that the world is older and stranger than we think, and that beneath the sweet lies we tell ourselves, the dark truth of what our ancestors feared is not gone. It is merely waiting. It makes you wonder. What else is lurking just beneath the surface of the world you think you know? Does your hometown have its own local legends about the Fae? Stories of strange disappearances or places in the woods no one dares to go? Share them in the comments below. I want to read them. And if you're brave enough to dig into more forgotten histories, make sure you subscribe.